Hi, sisters, and welcome to the Body Ally podcast, where we are learning how to stop battling with our bodies and food from a faith-based approach. We learn instead how to be an ally with our bodies, partnering with them and accepting them as the gift that God intended them to be. Learning how to pursue health goals, not in an effort to prove value, but as an act of love. Hi, I'm your host, Carrie Nygaard. Today, we're going to talk about how emotional eating doesn't have to be this heavy, hard thing that it's been made out to be. Truly, I'm going to talk about really simple three aspects that really make this whole concept much easier to approach, to solve, and to be rid of. Emotional eating, first, let's talk about what is emotional eating. It's when we go to food to try to solve for our emotions, or we go to food to try to create a desired emotion. Some examples of this might be you've had a hard day, you feel a lot of pressure, you have some stress, you're looking for relief. And so what do? You go to food. Why? Because it's there and it's easy, and because society has supported us going to food. When we were little and didn't feel good, we were always asked, oh, do you want some food? If you felt sad, oh, you want some ice cream? The solution to all emotions was food. Why? Because the generation that raised us didn't know what to do with their emotions, and the generation that raised them didn't know what to do with their emotions. In fact, because they didn't know what to do with their emotions, there's also oftentimes shame infused around our emotions, feeling like having emotions is a shameful thing. It's not safe. We'll be rejected if we have emotion. And therefore, something really prevalent, which is food, is being pushed at emotions. Now, there are so many books out there that talk about emotions. We have therapists and counselors and life coaches and gurus and manifestations and meditations and on and on and on and on and on. And all of this has to do with emotions. You need to understand that everything we do as human beings is a result of seeking an emotion or trying to avoid an emotion, or because of an emotion we're currently having. Everything about being human is about emotions. So the less awareness you have around emotions, the more difficult it is to be human. And the more awareness you have about emotions, it's not an exit off of the human experience, but it expands your capacity to stay present as you sojourn throughout time in your life from moment to moment, when you understand a few basic things about your brain and about emotions. So with emotional eating, it can also be we want to create excitement. And so we go to try to find foods that have exciting memories around them that then create exciting emotions around them. Here's the thing, is that, and this is kind of at the forefront of science when it comes to neurobrain science. When we eat food, a dopamine response is had in our brain. Feel-good hormones like dopamine are released in our brain when we engage in a life-giving act, such as eating. And when we eat refined food, like flours and sugars, or foods that have like salt or sweet with a carbohydrate and with a fat, these little packets of food together, these little combinations create a larger dopamine response than just, would you say, an unflavored like chicken breast. There is still a dopamine response, but it's not so high. So it makes sense that when we're feeling emotions that are uncomfortable, that we would go towards food to try to solve for them, because our brain is hardwired to avoid pain and seek pleasure. So when we have uncomfortable emotions and we lack emotional awareness, it makes perfect sense that we would go towards having food urges, to go towards eating food that we may not even physically actually want, but we feel compelled like we must eat it. Do you ever feel like you don't really want the food? I mean, don't get me wrong. Sometimes we just cravings and it's like, oh yeah, that sounds good. I really want that. And then other times it's this, I don't even want it, but it feels compelled on me that I ought to have it. Last night I was in a town about an hour from where I live. And every time we go to this town, oftentimes we'll get an ice cream cone while we're there. And so my brain was sending me an urge to get an ice cream cone. And I stopped and I thought, I don't even feel like I want an ice cream cone. And so I didn't get the ice cream cone. The food urge still came. I know what to do with the food urge. There was no tug of war back and forth. Why? Because I know that ice cream is available anytime to me. Therefore, my desire for it is at a normal level place. And that's a whole nother topic we'll get into another time. In podcast number 4 and podcast number 6, I also get more into I talk more about emotions and deconditioning food urges. But today I want to talk about how emotional eating doesn't have to be such a heavy, difficult burden. So many women say, oh, I'm a stress eater or I'm an emotional eater, and it becomes part of their identity. so that if they were to stop doing those things, their brain is going to think, well, who am I if I don't do those things, right? So change work is identity work. And so if you identify as someone who's a stress eater, or who often has cravings around food, or emotional cravings, I should say, around food, I want you to realize it doesn't have to be so hard. It doesn't have to be so heavy. Okay? For the mass majority of women, it's not that they have to understand all of their emotions. It's that they need to understand what the basic 3 emotions are for them. And what do I mean by the basic 3? By and large, well, let me first explain this. A food urge is an emotion just like any other emotion out there. It's a sensation that's felt in our body. And I go more into talking about more specifics of how an emotion is just a sensation in your body in podcast 4 and 6. So check those out. But when you know a food urge and all other emotions, and a food urge is just a desire to eat, which is an emotion, just like all the other emotions. All emotions are just sensations felt in your body. That's all they are. That is it. They're just sensations in your body. You had a thought, which released neurochemicals in your brain. Those neurochemicals are processed in a specific place in your body, and voila, that is an emotion. The mass majority of emotions are processed in no more than 90 seconds. No more than 90 seconds, as long as you stay out of your brain. If you stop thinking the thoughts that are feeding that urge, then your cells in your body metabolize those neurochemicals in 90 seconds or less. Here's the thing though, you don't have to figure out all your emotions. Like I said, you just have to figure out your 3 basic ones. And what do I mean by that? Well, I realize this for myself, and I've noticed this with the thousands of women that I have coached. Okay, the thousands of women that I have coached. And most of them dealt with emotional eating around food in one degree or another. It wasn't that they had to figure out all of their emotions in order to stop emotional eating. And it wasn't even so much that they had to hammer out and figure out their food urge, though I do teach those skills around that to increase your capacity around that. But more importantly, they just need to figure out what are the top 3 emotions that I feel that when they come up, when those emotions come up, it causes you to desire to, your brain immediately will send you a food urge because of the discomfort of those emotions. For me, it's overwhelm, it's confusion, like decision fatigue, confusion, like what choice should I make? What should I do first in my day? What should I do second? It's this like, where does my attention need to be focused? Okay, so kind of this decision confusion and boredom. Those 3 things, those 3 emotions are the main emotions that compromise about 90%, 80 to 90% of the emotions I feel, that when I have those, my brain will then send me a food urge to try to distract me from the discomfort of those emotions. So people go through great lengths to try not to overeat on foods or emotional eat. They'll do things like try to hide food. I remember asking my husband to hide chocolate because I wouldn't want to eat the chocolate, but as soon as I felt any one of those 3 urges, most of the time, it was one of those 3 urges or emotions that would then lead to a food urge. That's more accurate. Then I would think, where's the chocolate? I have to eat the chocolate. Here's the solution. Get really good at understanding your top 3 emotions. And if you can't find the top 3, find the top 2 or even the top 1 emotion that you experience on a daily basis that seems to feed most of the urges, most of the food urges that you're having. So what happens is, again, to make sure you understand, is that you have a food urge because of some uncomfortable emotion that you're having during your day. That's not the reason why all food urges come, but for emotional eaters, it is. Okay? So anytime you feel one of these uncomfortable emotions, then your brain sends you the food urge to try to get you to receive pleasure from those feel-good hormones that are released in your brain when you engage in eating, to try to save you from uncomfortable emotions. Now, number 1, emotions aren't something that you have to hide from or be scared of. A feeling is something to be felt. It doesn't need a tug of war. You don't have to hide from it. It's simply a sensation in your body. There is no running away from it. In fact, the more you run away from your emotions, the more they find you. The more you try to run away from fear, the more fear holds you bound. The more worry in your life, worry breeds more worry. So the solution here is to identify the top emotions that you feel most of the time, the top 1 to 3 emotions, that when those emotions come up, your brain will then try to solve for it by sending you a food urge. And when you expand your capacity and understanding to know how you feel that urge in your body, that emotion in your body that's leading to the food urge, then you're able to solve for the mass majority of emotional food urges in your life. A massive amount. So let me give myself as an example. So when I first learned that an emotion is just something to be felt in your body, not long after, I was in my basement picking up kids' toys, and I had this urge to go eat food. And I stopped and I assessed, am I physically truly hungry? Like, am I having hunger cues? Nope. Okay, what am I feeling? And I noticed I was bored. I was doing something mundane. It was boring. And I scanned my body and went through the 4 steps of feeling a feeling that I talk about in modules 4 and 6. Or not modules, podcast episodes 4 and 6. And I just assessed, what does this feeling of boredom feel like? And I began to explore this emotion like I would a science experiment. What did it feel like? How would I explain it to someone else? Ladies, do you realize that when you go all in on experiencing an emotion, you learn that it's not the big deal that your brain was telling you that it was. It's only a sensation in your body. It will not overtake you. It won't undo your whole day. In fact, it's the avoidance of it that makes it so uncomfortable. When you run towards it and learn all you can about it, the power that it has in your life diminishes significantly. And so when you can open yourself up with a little bit of faith, right? And realizing that the emotion that I'm scared of is not the big, bad, scary monster feeling big wave that's going to overtake me. It's simply something to be felt. And the more all in you are on it, the more you're delivered from it, the more peace you will have from those uncomfortable emotions. So that particular day, when I felt boredom in my chest, and it felt like kind of a stiff, kind of like cardboard in my chest. And when I watched it, and I even looked at my watch, and timed it, it lasted about 45 seconds as I watched it. And then it lifted, and then I continued on the mundane task. And that was it. I also noticed that in my top 3, and you have to kind of watch for a few days. When you have food urges, assess, what am I feeling? And you'll catch on pretty quick what's going on. Another one is overwhelm. I'd walk into a room, there'd be a big mess. This is especially true when all my kids were little. There'd be a big mess. And I think I just cleaned this place and, they're undoing everything that I'm doing. And then I would feel this overwhelm. It was this pressure on my chest that kind of felt like it was taking my breath away. But when I went all in on feeling it and went through the 4-step process to feeling a feeling, I recognized that the overwhelm was not that big of a deal. It was a pressure right here. And though it was uncomfortable, it wasn't something that I had to run away from. And the more I went all in on it, the less power it had over me, the less often it showed up. And when it did show up, it was not as painful. It was just something to be felt. So every time overwhelm would come up, I'd put my head on my chest because that's where I felt overwhelmed. Now, anyone else who might identify overwhelm as being in their top emotions that they feel that seem to drive emotional eating in their day, you won't all feel it in your chest. Some of you will feel it in your gut. Some of you will feel it in your throat. Usually it's felt somewhere through the meridian of your body because that's where the vagus nerve runs through. Regardless, the point here being is that when I went all in on learning about and experiencing overwhelm, the less power it had over me. And then the less it showed up. And when it did show up, I knew exactly what to do with it. And I didn't need to run to food to try to solve for it. And when I woke up during the day, when I'd have a transition of going from one focus to another, trying to figure out what should I do next, and I'd have this urge that would then come up of time to go eat, I would then get really curious about the sensation of this emotion in my body. This kind of confused decision type fatigue sensation. And that was felt in my chest as well. And when I went all in on these emotions, those 3, I was able to significantly decrease the amount of food urges I received, not only because I learned how to feel food urges and decondition those, but I also expanded my capacity around the main emotions, the top 3 emotions that were creating 80 to 90% of the discomfort, emotional discomfort that was leading to the emotional eating. So my premise here is that emotional eating doesn't have to be the big, difficult boulder in your road. You can simply boil it down to watching yourself. What are the main top emotions that you're feeling in your day that seem to be leading you to have food urges? Expand your capacity around those top 1 to 3 emotions by going all in on them, by journaling about them, by treat it like a science experiment of observation. Get really good at feeling it. And the more you invite yourself to feel it, I want you to treat it like an annoying little neighbor boy or neighbor girl. Once upon a time, we lived in a place where there was a little neighbor child who would come knock on our door, especially Saturday mornings, early Saturday mornings. And it was very annoying, right? They're knocking on the door, and they wouldn't just knock and walk away. They'd stand there and knock, 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 over and over and over and over and over. And I got so tired of it, and I ignored it, and the little child went away. But it wasn't very long later that they were back, knock, 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 over and over and over. And finally, I opened the door, and I said, "Come on in." And I gave them my undivided attention, all in on this child. And this little child came in, and they kind of wandered around the main living area a little bit. And I was asking them questions, and I was engaged with them. And they stayed maybe 5 to 10 minutes, and the kids weren't up yet, and they couldn't handle my undivided attention too long. And they got what they needed or wanted, and they left, and they stopped knocking on the door. It is similar for emotions. When you stop avoiding them, they stop knocking on your door. When you go all in on them, you're able to complete an emotional circuit, and it's able to lift. You're able to expand your capacity. You're no longer having to become worried about the emotions you're going to feel that day because you've increased your capacity around them. And the more capacity you have to be with your emotions, the less power they have over you, the less intense they become, and the less you think you need to eat food to solve for them because you've expanded your capacity. You don't need to eat food to solve for your emotions because you're no longer trying to solve for them. All right, so those are my tips. How do you make emotional eating much easier? Is you stop trying to hide from it. You identify the top 1 to 3 emotions that you experience on a daily basis that seem to come right before the food urges come. That's what you do. All right, I want you to encourage you, share this podcast with others. Share it, share it, share it. Share it on social media. Share it with your friends and family. Leave comments, leave reviews. When you leave reviews and ratings, it helps these podcasts find their way to other people looking for similar content. Okay. It also lets the algorithm know that this is worthwhile and sharing to other people. Also, check out the descriptions below. In there are links to be able to learn about programs that I have to help women with food and with body, and also free online content, workshops and webinars to come to. My In Control of Food workshop or my Food and Body, the 4 Steps to Food and Body Peace webinar, all available by clicking the links below. All right, I want you to know that women were not put here on this earth to be thinking about food all the time or to be assessing their bodies, but you were put here to thrive and create and live out God's plan for you, not to think about food in your body all day, every day. All right, thank you so much, ladies. Give it a try. What do you discover are your top 1 to 3 emotions that you feel every day that make up the vast majority of the emotions that then lead to emotional eating? All right, let me know in the comments. Bye-bye.